The stainless steel doors of the airport catering facility sighed open at 4:17 a.m., releasing a breath of refrigerated air that smelled of industrial disinfectant, brewed coffee, and freshly baked bread. Fluorescent lights hummed above polished concrete floors still damp from the night's final sanitation cycle. Metal food carts rolled across the corridor with rhythmic clacks that echoed through the cavernous building, while workers in crisp white uniforms hurried between preparation stations, racing against the relentless schedule of international departures. Amid the movement, one man pushed a gray cleaning cart with slow, deliberate precision, almost invisible among the controlled chaos. No one spared him a second glance. Yet before sunrise ended, one quiet decision would expose a truth powerful enough to shake the entire airline, and no one in that building could have imagined why a janitor understood dangers that seasoned executives could not. Daniel Brooks moved with the practiced patience of someone who had long ago stopped expecting acknowledgement. His Navy maintenance uniform was clean despite years of wear, its sleeves carefully pressed before every shift. Thick work gloves protected hands roughened by chemicals and years of honest labor. Every motion carried discipline rather than routine. Even the way he folded used cleaning cloths into perfect squares suggested habits formed somewhere far beyond custodial work. He greeted everyone with the same small nod. Some returned it. Most did not. That had stopped hurting years ago. Outside, dawn had only begun to tint the eastern horizon with pale silver, but inside the catering complex the day had already accelerated into controlled urgency. Industrial ovens released comforting waves of warmth, while refrigeration units answered with icy currents that drifted through the loading bays. Stainless steel counters reflected sharp white light. Forklifts beeped in steady intervals. Printers spat out meal manifests destined for flights crossing oceans before lunch. Daniel noticed everything. Not because curiosity guided him. Because attention had once been the difference between safety and tragedy. As he disinfected the wheels of a transport trolley, his phone vibrated softly inside his pocket. He removed one glove before answering. A smiling photograph filled the screen. Lily. 10 years old. Bright brown eyes. Missing front tooth. Holding a handmade science project proudly toward the camera. Beneath the picture rested a single message sent before school. Good luck today, Dad. Don't forget tonight is my presentation practice. Daniel smiled with quiet warmth. He typed only 4 words. Wouldn't miss it, kiddo. Then he slipped the phone away and returned to work. That promise mattered more than anyone in the building could possibly understand. Across the production floor, voices suddenly sharpened. VIP menu inspection in 10 minutes. Executive tasting table ready. First-class carts must leave exactly on schedule. Employees straightened uniforms almost instinctively. Even department supervisors adjusted their ties. Someone important had arrived. Vanessa Caldwell entered the facility surrounded by managers who seemed to orbit her confidence. Her charcoal designer suit contrasted sharply against the white kitchen uniforms around her. Diamond earrings caught the fluorescent light whenever she turned her head. Every sentence she spoke carried the polished certainty of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. She barely looked at the workers whose labor sustained the operation. To Vanessa, efficiency mattered. People were interchangeable. The Dubai flagship departure cannot have a single imperfection, she said without slowing her stride. Every executive on board represents future contracts. Delays are unacceptable. Managers scribbled notes. No one questioned her. Daniel continued mopping a narrow service corridor only a few meters away. Invisible. Exactly as expected. A young flight attendant named Emma Lawson entered moments later, reviewing passenger preference lists while balancing a tray of beverage inventory. Unlike many others, she offered Daniel a genuine smile. Morning, Mr. Brooks. Morning, Emma. Big flight today. They're all big flights to someone. She laughed softly. I suppose that's true. It lasted only seconds. But kindness always lingered longer than people realized. Daniel resumed sanitizing equipment scheduled for loading aboard Flight 728, the airline's flagship international service. One transport cart paused beside him, stacked with carefully sealed gourmet meal containers wrapped in silver insulation. Something caught his attention. Not dramatic. Just wrong. His eyes settled on a tiny printed label. Preparation date. Expiration date. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. He leaned closer. Then checked another container. And another. His breathing slowed. Several premium meals had expired. Not by hours. By 2 full days. Daniel said nothing immediately. Instead, he inspected additional carts. Different batches. Different labels. Same result. Nearly 200 first-class meals carried expiration dates that had already passed. He closed his eyes briefly. Memories flickered behind them, voices from another life, inspection reports, emergency meetings, headlines he had spent years trying to forget. When he opened them again, calm had returned. He removed a small notebook from his pocket and quietly recorded every batch number. Then he walked toward the executive inspection area. Managers surrounded Vanessa as celebrity chefs presented plated samples beneath bright presentation lights. Cameras from the airline's marketing department captured promotional footage while supervisors applauded polished speeches about excellence and customer trust. Daniel waited politely at the edge until someone noticed him. One manager frowned. "What is it?" "I need to report a safety concern." The manager sighed. "Can't this wait?" "No." Vanessa turned slowly. Her eyes traveled from Daniel's worn boots to the cleaning supplies beside him. "And you are?" "Daniel Brooks. Sanitation." She folded her arms. "Make it quick." Daniel's voice remained steady. "The premium meals assigned to Flight 728 appear to be expired. Multiple batches. I believe loading should stop until they're verified." Silence. Then laughter. Not from everyone. But enough. One executive smirked openly. Another shook his head. Vanessa smiled with unmistakable amusement. "The janitor inspected our catering?" A few chuckles answered her. Daniel didn't react. "I checked the labels." "You checked labels?" Vanessa repeated theatrically. "How reassuring." More laughter. Emma stepped forward carefully. "If he noticed something, perhaps we should verify before boarding." Vanessa's smile disappeared. "You've been a flight attendant for 8 months. "Yes, ma'am." "And you're taking food safety advice from maintenance staff?" Emma hesitated. "I'm saying passenger safety should come first." The room became still. Vanessa's voice turned cold. "Then perhaps you're not ready to represent this airline." She looked toward human resources. "Collect her identification badge." Emma stared in disbelief. "Ma'am. Effective immediately." The badge clipped to Emma's jacket suddenly felt heavier than metal. Around the room, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence pressed harder than any raised voice. Daniel looked at the frightened young attendant, then at the unopened meal carts waiting for departure. He understood, with quiet certainty, that this morning had become something far more dangerous than expired food. And somewhere deep inside, a past he had buried years earlier had just begun to awaken. The loading bay vibrated beneath the weight of diesel-powered catering trucks as dawn finally broke beyond the towering glass walls of the airport. Orange sunlight stretched across polished concrete floors, colliding with the cold white glow of fluorescent fixtures that had burned through the night. Forklifts beeped impatiently. Metal lift platforms hissed into position beside waiting aircraft. The sharp scent of jet fuel drifted through the open cargo doors, mixing with chilled air escaping from refrigerated meal containers. Around Daniel Brooks, the airport continued moving with mechanical precision, as though the humiliation that had unfolded only minutes earlier had never happened. Emma Lawson stood frozen where security had taken her identification badge. The blue airline lanyard that had rested around her neck every working day now lay in the hand of a human resources officer who refused to meet her eyes. Daniel watched quietly. He could still hear Vanessa Caldwell's words echoing across the operations floor. "Passenger safety? Take your things." Not because Emma had broken protocol. Because she had dared to ask a question. Daniel bent down beside his sanitation cart and folded a microfiber cloth into a perfect square before placing it neatly inside a storage compartment. It was a small act, almost invisible, but it steadied him. Long ago he had learned that discipline was something no humiliation could steal. Emma approached him slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I shouldn't have spoken." Daniel looked at her for a moment before answering. "No." She searched his face, expecting anger. Instead she found calm. "You spoke because it was right." Tears gathered in her eyes. "They fired me. They dismissed your position," Daniel replied gently. "They haven't taken your character." For a brief second, her shoulders straightened. Then security escorted her toward the exit. Daniel watched until the automatic doors closed behind her. Only then did he return to the meal carts. Most employees avoided looking at him. Some pitied him. Others blamed him for Emma's dismissal. Whispers followed wherever he walked. "He's the cleaner who started all this. Why couldn't he keep quiet? He thinks he knows more than management." Daniel answered none of it. Instead, he unlocked the inspection panel on another catering cart scheduled for Flight 728. His eyes scanned labels, seals, temperatures, and batch numbers with astonishing speed. Every detail settled into his memory. The cooling units were functioning. The seals appeared intact. But something else disturbed him. The digital temperature log attached to the refrigeration module showed readings that could not possibly be genuine. Someone had manually overwritten the automated records. His heartbeat slowed. Not from fear. From certainty. This was no accident. Inside the executive conference room overlooking the loading docks, Vanessa addressed senior managers with complete confidence. "The situation has been handled." One executive frowned. "The sanitation worker seemed unusually certain." Vanessa dismissed the concern with a laugh. "Confidence isn't competence." Another manager hesitated. "Should we at least recheck the inventory?" Vanessa's expression hardened. "A delayed international departure costs hundreds of thousands of dollars." No one argued further. Authority had spoken. Back on the loading floor, Daniel quietly removed a small flashlight from his pocket. It was an ordinary maintenance tool. But in practiced hands, it became an instrument of investigation. He crouched beside the refrigeration unit and illuminated the barcode beneath the insulation panel. There it was. A replacement sticker. Almost invisible. Perfectly aligned. Designed to conceal the original production label. Someone had relabeled expired meals. Deliberately. Daniel carefully photographed the evidence with his phone. No flash. No unnecessary movement. Then he documented the serial number in his notebook. A young warehouse supervisor noticed him. "What are you doing?" "Recording equipment identification." "Why?" "In case someone asks later." The supervisor frowned. Something about Daniel's calm precision felt deeply unfamiliar. This wasn't how maintenance workers behaved. Minutes later, an alarm echoed across the loading dock. Not loud. Just one sharp electronic tone. A refrigeration monitoring console displayed an unexpected fault warning. Technicians hurried toward it. One attempted to silence the alert. Another searched frantically through manuals. The countdown toward aircraft departure continued. Stress spread through the room. Vanessa arrived moments later. "What now?" "The monitoring system locked us out," a technician admitted. "It won't verify food temperatures." "Fix it." "We're trying." Several specialists gathered around the terminal. Passwords failed. Override commands failed. Nothing responded. Daniel watched from several meters away. Finally, one exhausted technician muttered, "I've never seen this before." Daniel stepped forward. Very calmly. "The secondary verification protocol wasn't activated." Nobody answered. He continued, "The system defaults to archive mode whenever the primary log is manually altered." Every technician turned toward him. "What did you say?" one asked. Daniel pointed toward the screen. "You're accessing the wrong database." The lead technician frowned. "That's impossible." It isn't. How would you know? Daniel walked to the console only after the technician silently stepped aside. His fingers moved across the keyboard with quiet confidence. Not quickly. Precisely. 3 commands. 1 authorization sequence. A maintenance recovery code no one else seemed to recognize. The frozen interface immediately came back to life. Temperature records flooded onto the screen. Historical logs appeared. Override timestamps surfaced. Then every altered refrigeration entry became visible. The room stopped moving. No forklift beeps. No conversations. Even the nearby conveyor belt seemed suddenly distant. Silence settled over the operations floor with astonishing weight. The lead technician stared at the monitor. Where did you learn that? Daniel answered without looking up. I helped write that recovery protocol. No one laughed. No one breathed. Vanessa's confident expression faltered for the first time. Only slightly. But enough. One executive leaned closer to the monitor. The archive shows manual alterations. Another whispered. Those records were supposed to be hidden. Vanessa recovered quickly. This proves nothing. Daniel stepped back from the keyboard. I agree. Everyone looked at him. It proves records were changed. He closed his notebook. It doesn't yet prove who changed them. That single sentence shifted the room. Daniel wasn't accusing anyone. He was protecting the investigation itself. Even now. Vanessa forced a composed smile. Interesting performance. Her voice was smooth again. But unauthorized access to company systems is a serious violation. Several executives exchanged uneasy glances. The accusation sounded convincing. Daniel met her gaze without hostility. You gave me permission to inspect the problem. I never authorized computer access. The technician stepped aside. You exceeded your role. I restored your records. You interfered. Neither raised their voice. Yet every employee nearby understood they were witnessing something far larger than a disagreement. This was a contest between authority and truth. Vanessa turned sharply toward airport security. I want this man removed from sensitive operations immediately pending investigation. 2 security officers began walking toward Daniel. He didn't resist. He simply slipped his notebook back into his pocket. Inside it rested every batch number. Every serial code. Every timestamp. Evidence no one realized he had already preserved. As the officer stopped beside him, Daniel noticed something across the loading dock. One refrigerated catering truck was quietly reversing away from the building. Its cargo manifest had just been erased from the departure board. Someone wasn't just hiding expired food anymore. Someone was trying to make the evidence disappear. Rain swept across the airport parking structures before sunrise, turning the asphalt into a mirror that reflected blinking runway lights and broken ribbons of gold and blue. Cold wind rattled loose security fencing, carrying with it the distant roar of departing aircraft. Inside the airport's administrative wing, fluorescent lights buzzed relentlessly over polished tile floors that smelled faintly of coffee, printer toner, and damp wool coats. The building remained busy, but its energy had changed. Conversations were quieter. Eyes lingered longer. Rumors moved faster than luggage on a conveyor belt. Daniel Brooks sat alone in a small security interview room. The metal chair was uncomfortable by design. A digital clock ticked softly on the wall. He folded his hands together and waited. Years earlier, silence like this had frightened him. Now it simply gave him time to think. Across the table, 2 airport security investigators reviewed a folder thick with incident reports. Neither seemed eager to speak first. Finally, one of them looked up. Mr. Brooks, management has accused you of unauthorized access to airline systems, interference with flight operations, and possible evidence tampering. Daniel answered calmly. I restored archived records after your technicians requested assistance. They didn't authorize you. They stepped aside. That's not the same thing. No. The investigator leaned back. You understand this is serious? I do. And yet you seem remarkably calm. Daniel looked toward the rain-streaked window. Being calm doesn't change the facts. The room fell silent again. Elsewhere in the executive offices, Vanessa Caldwell was already shaping the narrative. She stood before senior leadership with flawless confidence, a tailored navy blazer replacing the charcoal suit she had worn earlier. Her posture remained perfect, her voice measured. The sanitation employee manipulated technical systems beyond his authority, she said. His actions disrupted our operation and compromised the integrity of the investigation. One executive frowned. But the archived logs were authentic. Perhaps. They also showed altered temperature records. Vanessa nodded without hesitation. Exactly why someone seeking attention might fabricate confusion. Another executive asked the question she had hoped to avoid. What about the expired meals? They were isolated labeling errors. No one looked entirely convinced. Still, no one openly challenged her. Not yet. Meanwhile, Emma Lawson sat inside a small neighborhood cafe 2 miles from the airport, her airline blazer folded neatly beside her untouched cup of tea. Her termination papers rested on the table. She read them again. And again. The words never changed. Dismissed for failure to follow supervisory instruction. She remembered Daniel's quiet voice. They dismissed your position. They haven't taken your character. For the first time since leaving the airport, she stopped crying. Across town, Lily Brooks waited by the apartment window. A backpack sat ready beside the front door. Colored note cards covered the kitchen table. Tonight was supposed to be her practice presentation for school. She kept glancing at the clock. Her father was never late. Not once. The apartment remained painfully quiet. Back at the airport, Daniel was finally escorted from the interview room. His employee access badge had been suspended. One security officer almost sounded apologetic. I'm sorry. Daniel offered a faint smile. You're doing your job. As they walked through the administrative corridor, dozens of employees looked away. Others whispered. Some believed the accusations. Others simply preferred not to know. Reputation, Daniel thought, could disappear much faster than truth could be discovered. Outside, the rain had eased into a cold mist. Daniel stood beneath the terminal canopy, waiting for a city bus. His phone vibrated. Lily. He answered immediately. Dad? I'm here. Are you coming? He closed his eyes for a brief moment. I'll be a little late. A pause. Everything okay? Children often sensed what adults tried to hide. Daniel chose his words carefully. I'm having a difficult day. Another pause. Then Lily said something that tightened his throat. You always tell me difficult days don't last forever. A small smile appeared. I did say that. So, come home anyway. I will. No promises about work. No explanations. Only the promise that mattered. The bus ride home felt unusually long. Rain traced thin lines across the windows while neighborhoods drifted past in muted shades of gray. Daniel rested one hand on the worn leather notebook inside his jacket. The notebook contained everything. Batch numbers. Photographs. Equipment serials. Handwritten timestamps. Enough evidence to ask questions. Perhaps not enough to answer them. Not yet. That evening, Lily practiced her presentation in their modest living room. She stood proudly before a handmade poster about ecosystems. Daniel listened as attentively as if she were addressing an international conference. When she finished, she looked up hopefully. How was it? He smiled. You explained every fact. She frowned. But you forgot to tell everyone why it mattered. She thought about that. So, facts need a reason? They always do. She nodded slowly. Neither realized the conversation would soon define everything that followed. Late that night, someone knocked on Daniel's apartment door. Not loudly. 3 measured knocks. Daniel opened it cautiously. Anna stood in the hallway. Her hair was damp from the rain. In her hands she carried a small sealed envelope. I think someone wanted this destroyed, she said quietly. Daniel looked at the envelope. No return address. I found it in the office shred bin after they escorted me out. He accepted it carefully. Inside were printed maintenance authorization forms. Hidden beneath them was a decades-old compliance document. At the bottom of the final page appeared a familiar signature. Daniel Brooks. Below it, in faded ink, were the words, Lead Architect, International Aviation Food Safety Compliance Program. Emma stared at him. You weren't just a sanitation worker. Daniel looked at the signature for a long moment. A life he had buried. A name the industry had forgotten. And a truth he could no longer keep hidden. He finally met Emma's eyes. No. His voice was steady. I never was. Morning sunlight filtered through the immense glass facade of the airport's Executive Operations Center, casting long rectangles of gold across the polished stone floor. The familiar room that had witnessed Daniel Brooks's humiliation only days earlier now felt strangely different. The constant hum of air conditioning mixed with the distant rumble of departing aircraft, yet beneath those ordinary sounds rested an unmistakable tension. Every chair in the conference hall was occupied. Executives, supervisors, flight crews, catering managers, airport security officers, and legal investigators waited in uneasy silence. Daniel entered wearing the same neatly pressed maintenance uniform. Nothing about his appearance demanded attention. Yet every eye followed him. Beside him walked Emma Lawson, carrying the sealed envelope she had rescued from the shred bin. Behind them came investigators from the airline's Independent Compliance Division. Their expressions revealed nothing. Vanessa Caldwell stood confidently near the front of the room. She still believed control belonged to the loudest voice. The lead investigator placed several folders on the conference table. Before we begin, he said evenly, all electronic records have been recovered from archived servers. Security footage from the catering facility has also been authenticated. The room grew still. Vanessa folded her arms. I welcome a complete review. So do we. The investigator projected a timeline onto the large display. Images appeared one after another. Security footage showed Daniel examining meal labels without disturbing a single container. Another recording captured him politely reporting the expired meals. A third showed Emma asking only that the food be verified before boarding. There was no confrontation. No misconduct. Only a warning. Then another video appeared. It showed a catering supervisor, acting under instructions received moments earlier, placing replacement labels over the original expiration dates. Gasps rippled through the room. Vanessa's expression hardened. That proves nothing about my involvement. The investigator nodded. You're correct. He clicked to the next file. An internal email filled the screen. It had been deleted from the active system but recovered from the archive Daniel had unknowingly restored. The message was brief. Do not delay Flight 728. Replace labels if necessary. We cannot afford another cancellation. The sender's name appeared beneath it. Vanessa Caldwell. Silence settled over the room with a weight that no one could ignore. For the second time in the story, silence spoke louder than outrage. Vanessa looked around the room as if searching for someone to defend her. No one did. The investigator opened the final folder. There is one more matter. He removed a faded document protected inside a clear archival sleeve. This compliance manual established the food safety recovery protocol still used by this airline. The cover page bore a signature. Daniel Brooks. Lead Architect, International Aviation Food Safety Compliance Program. Several executives exchanged astonished looks. One elderly board member leaned forward. I remember that name. Another nodded slowly. You designed the emergency audit procedures after the contamination crisis years ago. Daniel answered quietly. I was part of the team. You led the team. The board member corrected. The investigator continued. Our review also found that Mr. Brooks resigned after refusing to approve altered safety findings during a previous investigation. His objections were later proven correct. Every assumption in the room began to collapse. Vanessa finally spoke, but her confidence had disappeared. You left that part of your life behind. Daniel met her eyes calmly. I left the position. He paused. I never left the principles. No one applauded. The moment deserved something quieter. The airline's chief executive stood. Ms. Caldwell, effective immediately, your employment is terminated pending further legal proceedings. Security officers approached her, not with anger, but with professional restraint. Days earlier, they had escorted Daniel from the building. Today, they escorted the person who had abused her authority. Justice arrived without spectacle. It simply arrived. The chief executive then turned toward Emma. Ms. Lawson, your dismissal is rescinded. You acted in accordance with the values this company claims to uphold. We offer our sincere apology and invite you to return with full restoration of your position. Emma smiled through tears. Thank you. Finally, the executive faced Daniel. Mr. Brooks, this airline owes you more than an apology. We'd like to offer you the position of Global Director of Aviation Food Safety. The room waited. Many assumed he would accept immediately. Daniel thought of Lily practicing her school presentation in their small apartment. He remembered the promise he had made. He smiled gently. I'm honored. A brief pause. But my daughter has already spent too many evenings waiting for me to come home. The executive listened carefully. Daniel continued. If there's a role that allows me to improve the system and still be her father first, I'd gladly consider it. The chief executive smiled. I believe we can arrange exactly that. For the first time in many years, Daniel accepted recognition without surrendering the life he had built. A week later, the airport looked much the same. Flights departed. Announcements echoed through the terminals. Cleaning carts rolled across polished floors. But whenever employees saw Daniel walking through the catering facility, they no longer saw only the man pushing a sanitation cart. They saw the man who had quietly protected thousands of strangers without asking for credit. That evening, Lily finished her school presentation in front of her father. Did I remember to explain why the facts matter? She asked. Daniel smiled. You did. And? You reminded everyone that truth protects people. She grinned. I learned that from you. Outside their apartment, the sun slipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in warm shades of amber and violet. Inside, there were no cameras, no executives, and no applause, only a father keeping the promise that mattered most. Because in the end, a person's greatest title is rarely the one printed on a business card. It is the quiet trust they earn by choosing integrity when no one is watching, proving that true dignity belongs not to those who seek status, but to those who never abandon what is right.